Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Min Sun-hee with our panel of foreign journalists stationed here in Korea. It's great to see you all.
Good to be back, thanks.
Well, the 2018 Winter Olympics will be held in Pyeongchang, Gangwon Province early next year. In this edition of Foreign Correspondents, we take a look at this major sporting event. The 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics is right around the corner. With the slogan Passion.Connected, the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics will be held next year from February 9th to the 25th for 17 days. The Pyeongchang Winter Games is expected to be the largest Winter Olympics ever. 6,500 athletes from 90 countries are set to compete at 102 events in 15 sport disciplines.
The Olympic Winter Games Pyeongchang 2018 will open up new horizons. It will connect the people and the passion of the Republic of Korea with the world. Pyeongchang.
In July 2011, the International Olympics Committee voted Pyeongchang to host the 2018 Winter Olympics. The reaction of the people was immense. In a poll conducted shortly after the selection, 9 out of 10 respondents rated the bid for the Winter Olympics as a good event. Economists forecast that the direct and indirect economic benefits of the Olympics would reach 65 trillion won, or $57.6 billion. The Pyeongchang Olympic Organizing Committee expects to have a positive impact on the national brand enhancement, economic revitalization, and balanced regional development. Also, the focus is on whether or not North Korea will participate in the Olympics under the slogan of Passion.Connected. This comes amid hopes of facilitating inter-Korean interaction through the Olympics.
만약 북한이 참여한다면 올림픽 정신의 고취에 기여할 뿐만 아니라 우리 지역과 세계의 평화 그리고 인류 화합에 기여하게 될 것이다.
There is less than 200 days left until the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. Drawing more public attention and preparing it well will be the key to hosting a successful event. The expression, the third time's the charm, holds great meaning for Pyeongchang because its recent bid for the 2018 Games came after 2 previous failed attempts. In the first round of voting this time around, Pyeongchang secured 63 out of the 95 votes cast. Elise, what made it popular this time around, do you think?
Well, I don't think it's unheard of that previous attempts will then kind of help the third time or the next time that cities try and get the Olympics. So this has certainly happened with IOC bids previously. But also, you know, there hasn't been an Asian Winter Games in quite a while. And so it was, in a lot of ways, I think it's this part of the world's turn. So I'm glad to see that it's happening, and it's happening while we're all here in Korea.
In South Korea, skiing in particular is becoming more popular. There's more resorts and more people are getting out skiing. So I think the actual, winter sports climate in South Korea perhaps improved. Also, there's a learning curve that goes on when in the previous bids, I think Elise alluded to that as well, where the Olympic Committee has whole sets of criteria, and over time, over the first couple of bids, Pyeongchang is going to learn more about what the Olympics are looking for.
Right. Frank, what winter sport are you interested in? I mean, are you interested in the snow sports like ski jumping, or the skating sports like figure skating, the ice sports, that is?
I'm a big jock. I skied when I was 6 years old. I played hockey at the same age. I'm from Vancouver. So I'm interested in particularly those 2 sports. I love the downhill ski racing. And of course, the ice hockey has been a big deal for Canadians. The whole country will be watching ice hockey at the Winter Olympics for sure.
Koichi, what about you? What are you interested in?
Figure skate, because we have a big star, Han Yuzuru in Japan. So yeah, everybody is interested in figure skating.
Right, so you'll be covering the event next year then?
Yes, I will.
I see.
Yeah.
Elise, what about sliding sports? Are you interested in bobsleigh, luge?
Oh, like the luge, right, yes. Ever since I was a little girl, I would watch that. I don't know why in particular, but what's really going to be special about this particular Olympics is a chance to actually see these live, you know, and actually be in the Olympic grounds. That I haven't covered before as a journalist, so I'm looking forward to the whole sort of event and all of the pageantry around it. It should be interesting.
Aside from the sports themselves, do you also go out of your way to watch the opening and closing events, Frank?
I've never been much into the opening and closing events. I like to watch the actual competitions, you know, but I understand that there's been two sides to it, the spectacular aspect of the opening and closing events, and also the other issue is the expense and that's been spent and the emphasis that's been spent on those events. Those two, the opening and closing, you know, my understanding is that they draw a tremendous amount of interest to the country and the host city, and so they really sort of want to get that part right.
Right.
I visited actual construction site of that stadium for the ceremony in last February. And it was really cold and very windy, so I hope I can watch it in a better circumstance next year.
Right. Conflict between organizers of the committee, the planning committee, and environmentalists has also been quite fierce, especially following reports that the organizing committee felled some 50,000 trees from a 500-year-old virgin forest as part of plans to make a ski slope. What are your thoughts on this, Frank?
Well, I've visited Mount Arirang a couple of times. That's the mountain that was, that all of these trees were cut down to build the downhill ski slopes. That's a really exceptional decision that I feel was made by the Olympic Committee and was kind of against the Olympic Charter that talks about sustainability and environmental preservation and things like that. A lot of promises were made about what's going to happen with that area after the Olympics. It's really unusual. They're building this just for the Olympic Games. It's going to be used for 4 days of events, and then it will be transformed, either returned to its original condition with replanting old growth trees, which is really unlikely to succeed according to environmental experts. As you mentioned, it's a 500-year-old old growth forest. It had some historical and cultural significance here in South Korea. It's a beautiful area that's really been kind of, you know, in a way destroyed just for these 4 days of events.
Is it common to see such conflict between green campaigners and organizing committee of large sporting events?
It's in Nagano Winter Olympics in 1998. Yeah, there was that sort of issue, and they had to change I think two times for downhill course. But still, eventually, it had to go through nature park. So local environmental activist group opposed quite harshly. And you know, if you Google Sochi Olympics environmental issue, then hundreds of articles comes out. So I think it's quite a common issue.
Right. President Moon Jae-in called on the International Olympic Committee to help with inviting North Korea to the event, claiming that this would ensure regional and global peace.
바라근대 최초로 남북 단일팀을 구성하여 최고의 성적을 거두었던 1991년 세계 탁구 선수권 대회와 세계 청소년 축구 대회의 영광을 다시 보고 싶습니다. 남북 선수단 동시입장으로 세계인의 발수가채를 받았던 2000년 시드니 올림픽의 감동을 다시 느껴보고 싶습니다.
What are the chances of North Korea joining this event, Elise, in your opinion?
Well, so far, they have not responded to the overture positively. I saw one state media report, I think, rejecting it. But also, there's the issue of, does North Korea have an Olympic caliber athlete to participate in the Winter Games? Because you would have to qualify as well. So you know, it's a big overture by President Moon Jae-in. This is one of many things that he has done to try and reach out to North Korea, in addition to trying to have family reunions again and restart talks. And so it seems like one of those things that would look good, or at least look good politically for him to align with his promises, but I'm not sure that it's likely to actually bear fruit.
And it's difficult on another sense, in that if they do allow some North Korean athletes to participate, how are they going to perform? If they hadn't really qualified, it could kind of backfire on North Korea. There was the suggestion by the sports minister here in South Korea to have the women's hockey team be a joint hockey team. And then that might involve some South Korean hockey players have to sit out the Olympics that had already trained and qualified with the team. So there are some other issues that need to be considered when you're going to invite North Korea, especially at such a late date.
Right.
Also, I have some North Korean friends since, you know, I was in China, and, you know, they are very proud people, right? So I don't know if they are happy to accept such a special treatment from IOC, so I don't know.
Right, we're all very cautious then. Koichi, you will be covering the events,
Yes.
the event next year. What will be the focus of your stories?
Actually, well, there will be more than 20 reporters and photojournalists coming from my company, from Tokyo or Osaka, and they don't speak Korean, but I do. So I think I have to do many supporting jobs, mainly, but still I'm willing to follow as many human story as possible.
Right, so you'll be very busy next February then?
Yes, I think so.
Will we be able to see you on the show? We're not sure. Elise, what would you focus on? What are you planning to focus on?
Well, we also, NPR, my company, is going to send a crew, as they always do, to all the Olympics. It's probably less than 20, more like 6 to 12. But since there's going to be a lot of journalists parachuting in, I think my responsibility, as it's been laid out, is to do a lot more of the stories about Seoul and about, you know, South Korea, and that aren't necessarily pertaining to the games or covering specific events of the games, but infrastructure around it, you know, any sort of cultural clashes that come up, any political issues that might come up as a result of the games. So I don't think that I'll get to actually, you know, sit around and watch figure skating, for example, but really be working on what's going on around the Olympics itself.
Frank, what about you?
Well, I've done some work in the past for Be in Sport, which is Al Jazeera's sports network. So I might be involved with them in the Olympics, I'm not quite sure. Press TV is mostly concentrated on hard news, so they won't be that interested in the Olympic Games, so I'll probably be doing the similar type of thing that Elise will be doing, which is looking at the issues surrounding the Olympic Games.
Right. In this next report, we explore the economic impact of these global games. A sporting event that brings the world together, the Olympics. However, not all Olympics were successful in economic terms. This is because there have been a few cases of economic loss that can be also referred to as the curse of the winner in being selected as the venue of the Olympic Games. One example is the Sochi Winter Games held in 2014 prior to the Pyeongchang Winter Games. When Sochi was selected as the host city for the Winter Games in 2007, the initial budget was estimated at $12 billion. However, it has been reported that Sochi spent $51 billion. However, a successful Olympic event certainly exists. The Los Angeles Olympics in 1984 attracted corporate sponsorship by putting corporate names in the venues. The LA Summer Games, which was the first case to attract private finances to the Olympics, had a surplus of about $200 million. At the same time, after the event, the management and use of the venues must be considered as well. There are a total of 12 venues for the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, and the construction of these venues amounts to 840 billion won, or roughly $740 million. Vancouver, Canada, which hosted the 2010 Winter Olympics, is considered the best example of reusing the Olympic venues. Before the construction of the venues even took place, it was set to be used as a sports complex center for residents after the Olympics. Also, the ice rink used as the speed skating venue of the 1980 Calgary Winter Games is being used by short track and speed skaters from more than 10 countries for training. As in many cases, it is not easy to be economically successful. However, some even argue that the economic effects of the Olympics are often visible. The national brand of the country and the international reputation cannot be measured with a numerical value, but it can someday return as economic gains. Job creation, infrastructure enhancement, and revitalization of the sports industry can never be overlooked. From its selection as the host city, the Pyeongchang Winter Games, which has been receiving both expectation and concern, is attracting attention as to whether it can be recorded as a successful Olympics event. The Olympic Games seeks to bring people from different corners of the globe together under the common interest of sports, in hopes of strengthening a universal sense of well-being and goodwill. Do these games play a part in ensuring global peace, Koichi, in your opinion?
Hopefully, but we should more focus on their athlete, their hard work, hard training, and their achievement gives us some inspiration for our daily lives. So that is the most important thing about Olympic game. And Olympic game is the biggest sports event in the world. So.
Right, so in terms of maybe peace, it's more symbolic then?
Elise, we shouldn't underrate or undervalue the power of soft diplomacy or soft power, you know, and I think that the Olympic Games, and just as language exchanges or study abroad, you know, these things can really help expose different cultures to different people from around the world and then foster relationships in ways that are very difficult to prove, you know, in any sort of hard metric, but can be very effective in just maintaining this sense of internationalism and globalism that seems to be on the wane as nationalism seems to rise.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about that and see, you know, quite a bit of nationalism and patriotism in the Olympic Games that I wish really wasn't part of it. I recognize that the Olympic Games can be instrumental in fostering greater understanding between countries and peace in the world, so to speak. And the soft power that Elise mentioned is really unquantifiable, and I think that also encourages countries to sort of throw money at the Olympic Games, thinking that there will be national benefits that spin off in other areas of the country's soft power, in areas like, let's say, tourism benefits, or even just soft power diplomatic benefits.
Right. Others have pointed to the financial hardships following the hosting of these games and have claimed that such realities actually make the games less attractive to potential hosting nations. Do you agree, Elise?
Well, you do have to borrow a lot in order to build so quickly, right? All of this infrastructure that goes into these games, and then also, or just being able to host. But then also, there's all these stories about or possible smoke around the likelihood of graft and bribery with the IOC in order to win games, as we saw with the Sochi Winter Olympics. And so they are A, very costly, but B, following the fast buildup of cities where people may not be going in droves, what happens, you know? And you have all these stadiums, for example, built for the World Cup and for the Olympics in Brazil that are just dilapidating. They're not being used anymore, and this was enormous amounts of manpower and millions of dollars that are just kind of sitting there unused. And so these are huge questions, and I wonder whether only cities that already have the infrastructure and already have the populations that support these kinds of big events should be hosting the Olympics, because I think building up cities that don't ends up being a lot more costly than beneficial.
On a brighter note now, which Winter Games was most impressive in your opinion, Elise?
When I was growing up, I first sort of became conscious of the Winter Olympics and the excitement around it, probably around Lillehammer, which was in Norway in the early 90s, I believe. And this is when there were a lot of these really big name figure skaters, Kristi Yamaguchi and Nancy Kerrigan and Tanya Harding. And there was this scandal around Tanya Harding hiring some goons to actually injure Nancy Kerrigan before the Olympics. And so this is what really sears in my brain, because not only of the competition between these women who were all American, but also kind of the big deal that it became because of the injury to Nancy Kerrigan.
Frank, Canada hosted the Winter Olympics twice, once in 1988 after the Summer Olympics here in Seoul, and another time in 2010 in Vancouver. The Vancouver Games were covered quite favorably by the media here. What are your thoughts on those games?
Well, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it was really unprecedented for Canada to do so well in the Olympic Games. I think it's about time that we did well in the Olympic Games. Canada is, you know, a huge winter sports country. So I think that was kind of overdue that we have a successful Games. Maybe it all happened that one instance. It also, I think, provides a microcosm of some of the problems surrounding the Games. In terms of the corruption involved and the tremendous debt that can be generated. Even after the Games, the government has resisted doing a complete audit of the Games. And the numbers that come out of it are all kind of fuzzy. What is true is that a tremendous amount of money, tens of billions of dollars, again, were spent on infrastructure unrelated to the actual events that were transportation infrastructure, which is interesting sort of comparison that you can make with what's going on here. But overall, the Games were considered to be a tremendous success.
Right. Koichi, Japan also hosted the Winter Games twice, once in Sapporo and the second time in Nagano. How well are these Winter Games venues being maintained right now?
I made a phone call to my friends in Nagano who is working for a local newspaper there. But surprisingly, well, Nagano Olympics there were many scandals and also environmental issue, but still local people are saying that looking back 20 years and it was worth holding it. One thing is the popularity on winter sports soared, so people are still using all the facility except bobsled. Other things, speed skate and all things are well used. And also public transportation, they built a bullet train Shinkansen from Tokyo to Nagano directly. And because of that, the tourists, especially foreign tourists coming to Nagano, shot up, he said, like 14 or 15 times more than 20 years ago. So that's what they were feeling right now.
Elise, you talked about how the Winter Olympics are not generating or have not generated as much interest as the Summer Games. And some critics say this is because the Winter Games are an expensive sport, that they're only reserved. It's the Winter Olympic Games basically is a celebration of the countries that are privileged. How do you respond to these criticisms?
Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, these are sports that are largely inaccessible for young kids and families that aren't elite, right? Or have the money to buy the equipment that's required. You played hockey and skied as growing up. Surely you know how expensive it is to get all of the gear for both of those sports. And then also for folks who are parts of the world where you're warm climate parts of the world that are near the equator. And I grew up in the South, in the States. And so, for example, in Texas, there is no hockey as a school sport. You wouldn't play that. There isn't even field hockey, which doesn't require ice, because it's culturally not something that is pervasive. And so I understand that, but that would happen with summer sports too, with the exception of, say, running and sprinting. So sports that you can kind of do without gear are always going to be more accessible than those which require a lot, not only to actually play the sport, but also to get to the locations in order to, say, ski or figure skate or bobsled.
Right. Now, before we go then, as nationals of countries that hosted the Winter Games more than once, what words of advice would you give to the organizing committee here to ensure a successful hosting of the Winter Games next year? We'll start with you, Frank.
I would say watch your budget and dial it down. That's one of the things that they did in Vancouver. They got a little criticism for some of the venues being, not as polished as they could have been, but I think they probably saved a few $1 million.
Right. Koichi.
Well, one good thing about Nagano is they started one school, one country campaign. So every school in Nagano Prefecture has to pick one country and keep supporting this country. So host countries should not only support their country. They have to support other countries, right? So, And this relationship goes on after that for 20 years. You know, they had a kind of sister city or sister school relationship, and it's, you know, broadened this children's eyes to the world. So it was a good idea.
I see. So hopefully a similar idea here in Korea. Elise?
I would say reuse and recycle, and Japan is actually very good about this, even culturally. So that which you plan for just for the Olympic Games, you should also create a plan for use afterwards, so that they can sustain life, you know, beyond just the quick 2 weeks in which the Games go on.
Right. Well, Koreans believe the most important element in ensuring a successful hosting of the Winter Games in Pyeongchang next year is public interest. Now, that's according to a survey by Korea's Culture, Sports and Tourism Ministry. And we hope media coverage as such will raise greater awareness of the Games. Thank you for watching.